Hi everyone! Today I would like to talk about shoes, especially shoes for travel and which ones I bring with me, because I find picking the right shoes for travel can be quite difficult, especially when you're a minimalist traveler or a one-bag traveler. Because if we pick the wrong shoes, then our dream vacation can quickly turn into a blister-filled, stinky shoe kind of nightmare like I had once. So after a lot of trial and error over the last few years, I finally settled on a system that works for me. Doesn't matter where I go and when I'm going. So today I want to talk a little bit about how many shoes I usually bring, which exact shoes I bring with me for which season, and just a few tips and lessons that I learned over the last few years. And let's jump right in and talk about how many shoes I bring. Well, I usually travel with 2 pairs of shoes. I usually have one main pair, like a proper shoe that I use for everything. I wear those shoes not only on the travel days, I wear them for everything that I do, day in, day out. So I go on hikes with them in the warmer months. I use them for long walks through cities, sightseeing, going to the supermarket, going to restaurants, all those things. And what I need for that is a comfortable shoe with a somewhat decent sole. And I forgot to mention, I also use them for driving, because here in Europe, you're kind of required to wear proper shoes when driving. I mean, it's not per se forbidden to wear sandals, but then the insurance probably drops out or you get part fault if an accident happens. So I just prefer to not risk it and I just wear my tight shoes all the time. And since I wear this pair usually when I'm traveling in the plane or on the other days when I'm in transit, I don't care too much about how packable they are. Only my second pair of shoes needs to go into the backpack, and for that I need more packable shoes. The second pair that I always bring with me are either sandals for the warmer months or house shoes for the colder months. And I'm a little bit picky. I always like to have one pair of shoes that I can easily slip in and out of, just to wear it around the house when the floors are cold, or just to go outside to the garden or to the swimming pool, so something easy to put on and off. So now let's move on and talk about which shoes I actually bring. In total, I have 6 pairs of shoes that I choose from. I have 3 pairs of main shoes and I have 3 pairs of my secondary shoes. And depending on the destination and the location and the season, I kind of mix and match and adjust my combinations. So when I travel in the summer, my absolute favorite type of shoe are the Vans Ultra Range ones. This is already the 3rd pair that I own. These ones are brand new. I usually always buy them in the winter when they're on sale, and then I usually get a good price on them. So these ones I just bought for 50% off last winter. And the reason why I like them very much is because they're extremely lightweight, very comfortable, very breathable. I think they look very nice, so I don't need to feel bad if I go to a restaurant or anywhere with them. But at the same time, they have a little bit of a different sole that is a little bit more outdoorsy, and it's very suitable for me to go on long walks and easy hikes as well. As far as I understand, they invented that shoe for surfers because they wanted to have a good shoe to walk to their surf destinations over trails and stuff. And so far for me, this model has been quite perfect. Nowadays, Vans makes lots of similar shoes like this and also cheaper versions like the Range, but I have not found anything that works as well for me as the Ultra Range does. The only downside with them is that they run rather small, so you may need to size up if you decide to get something like this. So this is the pair of shoe that I wear for everything, and in the summer, as my second pair of shoe, I usually travel with some flip-flops. Because they're easy to slip in, slip out, I can wear them around the house, but also when I go to the beach or to the swimming pool. Usually I just wore Havaianas or whatever I could get my fingers on, but this winter I now purchased some Astro sandals, I think is the name. And they have a little extra strap that I can thread through here to turn them into more sturdy sandals. Because of the weather here in Europe, I did not have the chance yet to test them, but I will report back in a few months in my gear update videos if that was actually useful or just a gimmick. But like all other flip-flops, they're very packable and easily fit into my bag. In the winter months, I'm less concerned about the sole because I don't do any wild hikes in the winter. I am more concerned about the warmth. And in the winter, I usually travel with my Converse shoes. They're a little bit thicker and insulated, and for me, they're very comfortable to just walk hours at a time. And as I mentioned, since I wear them when I'm flying or when I'm in transit, I'm not really that concerned about the size because they never go inside of my backpack. The second pair of shoes that I bring in the winter when I travel are house shoes. And I usually just pick up house shoes like these ones. In the past, I always collected those cheap ones that you get in hotels. But I found that usually they just last maximum 2 to 3 weeks and then they just fall into pieces. Nowadays, I always just buy shoes like this. They are readily available in the winter in most supermarkets, and whenever I need a new pair, I just grab a new pair, and they're very packable and yet keep my feet very, very warm. The only time in the winter where I would not travel with those, but with a different pair like the flip-flops or my Crocs that I will show you in a second, is if I had to share a shower with other people. Then I would bring one that is out of rubber so I can use them as shower shoes as well. So now we already covered the winter and also the summer, but there's this tricky season in between, spring and fall, which sometimes is cold and wet, but also sometimes warm. So this time of the year I find a little bit more trickier. And it's also the time of the year where I usually start to hike again, so the sole of the shoe is a little bit more important to me. What I like to wear during those seasons are just some waterproof trail runners. They're very thin material, have good soles and waterproof. So if it's raining, my feet will stay dry. And if it gets very cold, then I just combine them with a warmer pair of socks or 2 pairs of socks if needed. And my second pair of shoes during that season are usually my sandals from Crocs because I can wear them with socks. Unfortunately, they're a little bit bulky. I'm sure there's better options available, but I just picked them up in Slovenia when I needed them, so I could not be too picky about the specific model, but at least they're lightweight and somewhat squishable, so they still fit into my backpack. But I like very much the flexibility I have with them, that I can wear them with socks or without, that I can use them in the shower or also just to walk outside even if it's wet. And yeah, and that's why they deserve a space in my bag. And now let's talk about what I do with longer trips or trips where I hit several seasons. Because as you can see, unfortunately, I have not found the Goldilocks shoes that can cover every season and every weather in one shoe. I have one of those trips coming up this summer because we're going to Spain for several months. So we're gonna be there in the hottest months of the year. But when we come home to Austria, it will be November. And on the way back home, we will encounter rain and most likely even snow here in Austria. And that makes it a little bit difficult because for the hot temperatures, my summer shoes would obviously be the right choice. But to come home and maybe hit the snow and the rain, the waterproof ones would be a great choice. But over the summer, these ones would be terrible with the Gore-Tex because I would just sweat all the time. So in situations like this, I just try to figure out which pair of shoes will make me suffer less. So for me, the winner that I will take with me are my summer shoes. Because I will be comfortable in those for months and probably uncomfortable for the last 2 to 3 weeks. So I suffer less in those shoes. And honestly, if it gets that bad with the weather, I can always just pop into any store and pick up a different pair if I really need to. And last, I want to talk about a few tips that I have for you because there's a few things that I learned over the years. The first one is that sometimes it makes sense to buy some shoes at your destinations. So for example, when I fly to Brazil, I never bring a second pair with me. So usually I would bring some sandals or my flip-flops with me, but since in Brazil Havaianas are available for €5 at every single corner, I usually just pick up a new pair when I arrive at my destination. Tip number 2 is how you can avoid to bring a second pair of shoes, because I know that many people really want to travel with a second pair of shoes to alternate them to get less foot pain. But what I found that works just as well for me is to just swap out the insoles. So for example, I did that when I was walking the Camino de Santiago last year. I had my custom-made insoles, but I also brought some cushioned insoles just from the drugstore. And during the day, if I felt I needed a different feeling in my shoes, I would just swap them out. And it felt like having a new pair of shoes without actually having to bring a second pair of shoes. And this trick could also be helpful if you're someone who has very sweaty feet, because most of the sweat and the stink is usually concentrated in the insoles. So if you can just bring a second one, you can swap them out and air them out, and that also helps remove the bad smell. But if you really think that you need a second pair, then look at a pair that is a little bit more squishable, a little bit more packable. And you do not need to buy expensive travel shoes with collapsible heels. In my opinion, shoes like my Vans also will work very well because they're very squishable and you can just pack them down rather small as well if you need to. The next tip that I have for you is something that I learned the hard way, because I learned that when I fly or when I travel to hot destinations, that my feet tend to swell a lot, and also my ankles. And then shoes that fit like a glove at home suddenly were torture instruments by the time I arrived at my destination. So nowadays I always make sure that I have a little bit of extra space in my shoe. And sometimes it's difficult to tell when you buy shoes how much room you really have. But I learned a very interesting trick from my aunt, and that is that usually in the shoes you can pull out the insoles. And then I just put the insole on the floor and I step on it, and then I can exactly see where my foot is larger than the bed or if I have enough space for my toes, which is for me very important for hiking, because when you go downhill and your shoe is too short, then you always bump with the toes to the front and then it's quite painful. So I always make sure that I take the sole out and step on it and really see if this shoe is even remotely suitable for my feet. And I also have wide feet, and that's then also easy to see if the shoe has enough space for me. The next thing is that you don't really need any fancy shoe bag, just any plastic bag will do. And even in the countries like Austria, where they're hard to get because we don't really have those thin plastic bags anymore, there's lots of options while traveling, and it's never that I did not find a good solution to travel with. Sometimes I used the dog poop bags from the dispensers, and sometimes I just used the shower cap from the hotel. So if you are a little bit creative, there's always an easy way to pack those smaller secondary pair of shoes. And my last tip, and the most important one, and one that I really learned the hard way, is that you should really take a little bit of time to break in those shoes before you leave for your trip. Don't do like I did. I once bought rather expensive tropic feel shoes, and they arrived like the day I left for my 2 months trip to Brazil, and I just brought them and I honestly was miserable. I got blisters, my feet would slip out when walking uphill from the shoes, and also they developed a smell that was just unbearable, and I usually don't have that problem. And it's not very nice, honestly, when you're traveling with a partner and you're in a hotel room where you cannot open a single window or anything, and you're sitting in there with your stinky, stinky shoes. So always make sure that you break them in properly and also test them a little bit before you leave. That would really have avoided a lot of misery for me. And in the end, I was so pissed off with those shoes that I threw them away and just traveled with my flip-flops for the rest of the trip. And as you can see, my shoe choices are not very fancy. And I know that many people worry about this, especially when traveling to Europe. But honestly, I find that Europe is very casual, and I never had a single problem walking with any of those shoes into even nice restaurants. And honestly, if a restaurant cares much more about my appearance than my appetite, then they really don't deserve my money anyways, and I prefer to just go to the next more laid-back restaurant around the corner. So I'm very happy with my choice of shoes. They cover me well for traveling all year long, and let me know which kind of shoes that you use. If you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing to my monthly newsletter or to this channel. That, as always, would make me very happy. And other than that, thank you very, very much for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!